Stop. You haven't subscribed to the channel yet. Subscribe now. We have new stories every day. Now, let's go. Trevor stared at his wedding photo, the silver frame catching the late afternoon light streaming through his home office window. In the image, he and Alice beamed at each other, young and in love, with their whole lives ahead of them. 8 years had passed since that day, but it felt like a lifetime ago as he set the frame face down on his desk, a gesture that had become habitual over the past few months. The happy couple in that photo no longer existed. In their place were two strangers sharing a house, their conversations reduced to mundane discussions about bills and schedules. The sound of the garage door opening pulled him from his thoughts. Alice was home early for once. Trevor checked his watch, 6:30 p.m. She usually didn't return until well after 8 these days. He listened to her heels clicking against the hardwood floors as he tracked her movement through the house. Then, Alice called out, her footsteps pausing. "Yes, I was thinking we could order from that new Thai place tonight. Have dinner together." A lengthy silence followed. "I already ate at the office. The Morgan account is keeping us busy." Of course it was. The Morgan account had become her universal excuse. Trevor pushed back from his desk and walked to the kitchen, where Alice stood checking the mail. Her designer blazer was still crisp despite the long day, and not a hair was out of place in her carefully styled bob. "The Morgan account," he repeated. Funny how one client can consume so much time. Alice's shoulders tensed slightly. "It's a major deal, Trevor. You know how important this is for the firm. More important than your marriage." She slammed the mail down on the counter. "Don't start. I'm not in the mood for another lecture about how I'm never home. When was the last time we had dinner together, or watched a movie, or did anything as a couple?" "I don't keep track," Trevor replied. Alice brushed past him as she headed for the stairs. "And I don't appreciate being ambushed the moment I walk in the door." Trevor followed her. "It's ambushing now to want to spend time with my wife. This is exactly why I work late." She spun to face him halfway up the stairs. "Every time I'm home, you suffocate me with demands for attention. I need space, Trevor. I need time to focus on my career." "Your career?" He laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call those late-night strategy sessions?" Alice's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just wondering why strategy requires so many dinner meetings, and we can have conferences and late-night calls in the bathroom when you think I'm asleep. Are you spying on me?" "I'm simply observing my wife pulling away from me." "There's a difference." Alice descended a few steps until they were eye level. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. My work is important to me. If you can't handle having a successful wife who doesn't run every decision by you, that's your problem, not mine." "This isn't about success," Trevor said quietly. "It's about respect. Honesty. Remember those wedding vows we took? The ones about honoring each other?" "Oh, for God's sake." Alice threw up her hands. "I'm going to take a shower. When I come out, I expect this interrogation to be over." She stormed up the stairs, leaving Trevor standing there, his hands clenched in a fist at his sides. The shower started running moments later, accompanied by the familiar sound, the soft ding of Alice's phone receiving a message. Trevor looked up the stairs, listening to the water run. The phone would be in her blazer pocket, probably tossed on the bathroom counter. It had been weeks since he'd last checked it. Promising himself he wouldn't become the paranoid, suspicious husband, he climbed the stairs, his footsteps silent against the carpet. He knew that paranoia had nothing to do with it. The signs were all there: the late nights, the defensive behavior, the constant phone checks. He wasn't imagining the distance growing between them. He wasn't inventing the way she recoiled from his touch, or how she always seemed to be texting someone when she thought he wasn't looking. The bathroom door was closed, with steam seeping out beneath it. Alice's blazer lay draped over the hallway chair, her phone visible in its pocket. Trevor's heart pounded as he reached for it. This was the moment he could either remain in denial or face whatever truth lay behind that locked screen. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he returned to their bedroom. Alice had never changed the password from their anniversary date. For digits that once represented their love, now about to reveal its destruction, his fingers trembled as he typed in the numbers -1 to 02 to 2. The screen unlocked, revealing a message preview that made his blood run cold. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to taste you again. Derek. Trevor sank onto the bed, his world tilting on its axis. In that moment, as the shower continued to run, and his wife hummed tunelessly behind the bathroom door, he began to understand that everything he thought he knew about his marriage had been a lie. And this was just the beginning. For the next week, Trevor lived in a state of controlled fury. Each morning, he kissed Alice goodbye as if nothing had changed. Each evening, he watched her leave for her late meetings, knowing exactly where she was going, and with whom the messages on her phone had told him everything. Derek, a client from her firm, or so she claimed in her texts. The affair had been going on for 6 months. Their rendezvous were carefully planned around Trevor's schedule. They met at high-end hotels, in restaurants where Trevor would never think to look. And sometimes the thought made his stomach turn in Derek's downtown apartment. Trevor sat in his home office, scrolling through the screenshots he'd taken of their conversations. He created a detailed timeline of the affair, each date and location meticulously documented. The evidence was damning. But it wasn't just the physical betrayal that cut him to the core. It was the way they talked about him. Poor Trevor, Alice had written. He actually suggested couple therapy today, as if talking about our feelings would make me want him again. Derek's response had been cruel. Some men just don't get it. They think being nice and reliable is enough. But you need more than that. Don't you, darling? So much more, Alice had replied. Things I could never do with him. He's too plain, too safe. Trevor's computer screen cracked under his grip. He forced himself to relax his fingers, taking deep breaths. He wouldn't let anger cloud his judgment. Not now, not when he needed to think clearly. The front door opened downstairs. Alice's voice drifted up as she spoke softly into her phone. "I'll call you back," she said as she passed his office. "Yes, tomorrow, same time." "I know. I miss you too," came the reply. Trevor's jaw clenched. He wondered if Derek knew that Alice used the same lines on him that she'd once used with Trevor. Did he realize he wasn't special, just the newest player in her game? Moments later, Alice appeared in his doorway, wearing a new dress Trevor hadn't seen before. "I'm going to that conference this weekend. Remember the one downtown?" Trevor nodded, maintaining his facade of ignorance. "Right, the marketing summit. I'll be gone Friday through Sunday. Try not to miss me too much." She attempted a playful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Which hotel is it at again?" "The Marriott." The lie came easily from her lips. "They're hosting all the keynote speakers there." Trevor pulled up the Marriott's website. "Funny. I don't see any marketing events listed for this weekend." Alice's smile faltered. "It's a private conference. Industry professionals only." Of course. Trevor turned back to his computer. "Have fun with Derek." The silence that followed was deafening. Trevor could hear Alice's sharp intake of breath. He could practically feel her mind racing for a denial. "What did you say?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. Trevor swiveled his chair to face her. "Derek, your client, the one you and he have been intimately involved with for the past 6 months. Have fun with him this weekend." All color drained from Alice's face. "You've been spying on me." "Spying?" Trevor laughed. "I didn't need to spy, Alice. You got careless. You left your phone unlocked. Your email logged in, left breadcrumbs. Any fool could follow. You had no right." "No right." Trevor stood so quickly that his chair slammed into the wall. "I'm your husband. I had every right to know you were making a fool of me." Alice stepped back, but her chin lifted defiantly. "Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Derek. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear? What I want to hear is why. Why him? Why throw away 8 years of marriage? Because he makes me feel alive. Alice's voice rose, filling the office. Because when I'm with him, I'm not just someone's wife. I'm not trapped in this suburban prison, playing house with a man who thinks date night at Olive Garden is exciting. Trevor absorbed each word like a physical blow, but he refused to show weakness. So I'm boring. Too safe. Not enough of a man for you. You want the truth. No, you don't. Alice's words dripped with contempt. Derek gives me things you never could. Makes me feel things you never did. Like what? Intimacy beyond the ordinary. Trevor watched her flinch at his crude words. Oh yes, I read all about that. How you were begging for it. Funny, considering how many times you told me it was revolting when I suggested it. Alice's face flushed red. You're just proving my point. Look at you, acting like a wounded little boy because your wife found someone better. Better. Trevor's voice turned icy. A man who sleeps with married women is better. At least he's not weak. Alice spat. At least he takes what he wants instead of begging for scraps of attention. Trevor moved closer, watching her retreat until her back hit the doorframe. You think I'm weak, Alice. You think I'm just going to roll over and accept this. What are you going to do? She sneered, though uncertainty glimmered in her eyes. Cry. Beg me to go to counseling. Face it, Trevor, you're not enough for me anymore. You never were. The last thread of hope, of possible reconciliation, snapped inside Trevor's chest. He stepped back, his expression hardening into something Alice had never seen before. Get out. Alice blinked. What? Get your things and get out of my bedroom. Sleep in the guest room, on the couch, or even in your car. I don't care. But you don't get to be with another man and sleep in my bed. This is my house too. Not for long. Trevor's voice was deadly calm. You want Derek so badly. Go to him. But don't expect anything from me anymore. No support, no help, no friendship. As far as I'm concerned, you're already dead to me. Alice stared at him, seemingly thrown by this new, cold version of her husband. Finally, she straightened her spine. Fine. I'll sleep in the guest room. But don't think this little display of backbone changes anything. You'll get over this, Trevor. You always do, because that's what weak men do. They forgive and forget. She turned on her heel, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Trevor waited until he heard the guest room door close before returning to his computer. He opened a new email account under a false name and began forwarding to himself every message, every photo, every piece of evidence he'd gathered. Alice thought she knew him, thought she could predict his reactions, but she had no idea what was coming. The next morning, dawn was gray and cold, matching Trevor's mood as he methodically stripped their bedroom. Every trace of Alice, her clothes, her jewelry, her precious collection of scented lotions, was boxed and moved to the guest room while she was at work. Her protests upon returning home fell on deaf ears. This is childish, she snapped, watching him remove her photos from the walls. You're acting like a teenager. Trevor continued his task without acknowledging her. Each item he removed felt like excising a tumor, cutting away the diseased parts of his life. Alice eventually stormed off, the guest room door slamming behind her late that night. As Alice slept, Trevor began laying the groundwork for his response to her betrayal. His laptop screen cast a blue glow across his face as he worked, creating new email accounts, documenting timestamps, saving screenshots. Every message between Alice and Derek was carefully cataloged and backed up to secure cloud storage. The evidence painted a devastating picture. Not only had Alice been physically unfaithful, but she had shared intimate details of their marriage with Derek, their private struggles, Trevor's insecurities, even their financial situations had become fodder for their cruel amusement. He actually cried during couples counseling. Alice had written in one message. "Can you believe it? Talking about how he misses our emotional connection." God, it was pathetic. Derek's response had been equally cutting. "Sounds like someone needs to reclaim his dignity. Good thing you found a real man." Trevor's fingers tightened on his mouse, but he forced himself to continue reading. Each message strengthened his resolve, hardening his heart against any remaining sympathy for his wife. The next day, while Alice was at her conference with Derek, Trevor visited his bank. The teller's eyebrows rose as he transferred half of their joint savings into a private account, but she completed the transaction without comment. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Lawson?" she asked. "Yes," he replied, pulling out his phone and showing her the text messages he had discovered. "I'd like to document that this transfer was made after uncovering my wife's infidelity for the divorce proceedings." The teller's professional smile softened with understanding as she carefully noted the date and time of the transfer, adding her own signature as a witness to his statement. Trevor then contacted a divorce lawyer specifically recommended for handling cases involving infidelity. The lawyer's response was swift and professional. "Document everything. Every message, every receipt, every unexplained absence. The more evidence you have, the stronger your position." Trevor smiled grimly. Evidence was something he had in abundance when Alice returned that Sunday evening. That evening, Alice found Trevor watching television in the living room, apparently absorbed in a basketball game. "If you're ready to discuss this rationally," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. Then, "Nothing to discuss," Trevor interrupted, not looking away from the screen. "You've made your feelings quite clear." Alice shifted uncomfortably, thrown by his indifference. "So that's it. You're just going to ignore me?" "No, Alice." He finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to do much worse than that. I'm going to show you exactly how weak I am." She scoffed, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Is that supposed to be threatening?" "Not at all." Trevor smiled, though the expression never reached his eyes. "Just a promise." Alice opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Something in his tone made her uneasy. Without another word, she retreated to the guest room. Trevor returned his attention to the television, but his mind was already racing with plans. Alice had destroyed their marriage, thinking him too weak to retaliate. She had burned down 8 years of trust and commitment for a few thrills with Derek. Now he would burn down her entire world, starting with a carefully constructed lie she built around her affair. Trevor began phase 1 of his plan. He created a detailed spreadsheet of Alice's schedule over the past 6 months, cross-referencing her work commitments with the hotel receipts he found in her email. The pattern was obvious. Every conference and late meeting corresponded with a hotel booking or a dinner reservation for 2. He also discovered something that made his blood boil. Alice had been using their joint credit card for some of these rendezvous, dinner dates at expensive restaurants, and luxury hotel getaways, all charged to the account they shared. She had been funding her affair with their money. Trevor documented every charge, every receipt, each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of their marriage. But it wasn't enough to simply leave her. No, Alice had done more than betray their vows. She had humiliated him, mocked him, treated his love and loyalty as weaknesses to be exploited. His laptop pinged with a new email notification. The divorce lawyer had sent over preliminary paperwork, along with a strategy for handling the division of assets. Trevor read through it carefully, noting how his documented evidence of Alice's infidelity would strengthen his position. The house creaked and settled around him as he worked through the night. From the guest room came the occasional sound of Alice's phone chiming, no doubt more messages from Derek. Let them plot and plan, Trevor thought. Let them think they've won. They have no idea what is coming. Trevor had compiled a devastating dossier of Alice's betrayal. Every message, every photo, every receipt, all organized and backed up in multiple locations. But this was just the beginning. Alice thought she knew him. thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. She was about to learn how wrong she was. As the first rays of sunlight crept through his office window, Trevor finally closed his laptop. The man who had once begged for his wife's attention, who had suggested couples therapy and date nights, who had tried desperately to save their marriage, was gone. In his place was someone Alice wouldn't recognize, someone who would show her exactly how much damage a determined man could do when pushed too far. Trevor stood, stretching his stiff muscles, and walked to the window. The neighborhood was coming alive with early morning activity. Joggers, dog walkers, people leaving for work, all going about their normal routines, unaware that behind the perfectly maintained facade of the Lawson home, a war was about to begin. Alice had traded 8 years of marriage for 6 months of thrills. Now she would learn the true cost of that decision. And by the time Trevor was finished, she would understand exactly how badly she had underestimated her husband. Later that day, Trevor sat in his parked car outside Derek's downtown apartment building, his hand steady on the steering wheel as he watched people enter and exit through the glass doors. 3 weeks of methodical research had led him to this moment. Derek lived in Unit 11. Information Trevor had gleaned from Alice's text messages detailed her visits, and his phone buzzed with a message from Alice. "Working late again. Don't wait up." Trevor's lip curled as he typed a response. "No problem. Take care." The casual exchange was part of his carefully crafted facade. For weeks, he had played the role of the defeated husband perfectly, acting as though he had accepted Alice's affair. He'd even started leaving the house during her late nights, pretending to visit friends or go to the gym. In reality, he was building a comprehensive profile of both Alice's and Derek's routines. A familiar figure emerged from the building, Derek himself, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed new money. Trevor's fingers tightened on the wheel as he watched the man who had destroyed his marriage stroll to his sleek BMW, probably heading to meet Alice. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Trevor muttered, pulling out his notebook and adding another entry to his growing list of observations. 6:45 p.m. Leaves apartment, gray suit, BMW heading east, dinner with Alice. The notebook contained weeks of similar entries. Derek's schedule was surprisingly predictable. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., in the office by 8 o'clock, lunch at the same 3 restaurants, drinks with colleagues on Thursdays. The man was a creature of habit, a weakness Trevor intended to exploit. His phone rang, displaying Alice's number. Trevor answered, keeping his voice neutral. "Hey." Alice's voice was slightly breathless. "I forgot to mention, I have that marketing conference next weekend." "The one in Chicago." Trevor allowed himself a small smile. A new lie. "Sure. How long will you be gone?" "Just Friday through Sunday. The firm's covering everything." "I'm sure they are." Trevor watched as Derek's BMW turned onto the main street. "Have a good time." "That's it." Alice's voice held a note of suspicion. "No questions. No accusations. Would it change anything if I did?" A pause. "No, I suppose not." "Then why waste the energy?" Trevor kept his tone deliberately flat. "You're going to do what you want anyway." Alice hesitated. "I know this is hard, but I appreciate how you're handling it. Being mature about everything." The sheer audacity of her statement made his blood boil, but his voice remained steady. "Goodbye, Alice." He ended the call and started his car, following Derek's BMW at a safe distance. The evening traffic provided perfect cover as he tracked his quarry through the city streets until Derek's car finally pulled into the parking lot of La Maison, an upscale French restaurant. Minutes later, Alice's Audi joined it. Trevor parked across the street, watching as the lovers met at the entrance and exchanged a kiss that made his stomach turn. Taking out his camera, he captured several clear shots of their greeting, more evidence for his growing collection. But simple documentation wasn't enough anymore. He needed to understand his targets completely, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. His phone buzzed with an email notification from his private investigator, who had come through with detailed background information on Derek. Trevor opened the file, scanning through the contents. Derek Mitchell, 36, occupation, senior investment manager at Riverside Capital, marital status, divorced for 2 years, criminal record, none, financial, high income, significant debt, current address, 1103 The Grand, downtown, notable, former gambling addiction, multiple casino debts cleared 3 years ago. Trevor's eyes narrowed at the last detail. A recovered gambling addict with a taste for luxury and married women. How interesting. He wondered if Alice knew about Derek's past, or if she cared. In her blind pursuit of excitement, she had latched onto a man with a carefully polished exterior masking significant flaws. The sound of laughter drew his attention back to the restaurant window. Alice was touching Derek's arm, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at Trevor in years. The sight should have hurt, but Trevor felt only cold determination. Let them laugh. Let them think they're untouchable in their little bubble of adultery and deceit, he thought, as his phone buzzed with another email, this time from his lawyer. The divorce paperwork was ready, but Trevor had asked him to hold off filing. He wanted everything in place before he made his move. Alice thought she'd broken him, reducing him to a passive observer of his own humiliation. But she would learn differently, very differently. Trevor opened his notebook again and began sketching out the next phase of his plan. He had Derek's schedule, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Now it was time to use them. The man's gambling history was particularly intriguing. Recovered addicts often carry deep fears about their past being exposed, especially in professional settings. As darkness fell over the city, Trevor watched Alice and Derek enjoy their expensive dinner, paid for with his money. Soon, they would discover the true cost of their affair, but not yet. For now, he would continue watching, learning, and planning. After all, revenge, like fine wine, required careful preparation. Trevor's office computer pinged with an incoming email from Alice's company server. His anonymous tip about workplace harassment had prompted an internal investigation, exactly as planned. The HR director's response was everything he had hoped for. Thank you for bringing these concerns to our attention. We take allegations of inappropriate relationships between employees and clients very seriously. Rest assured, this matter will be handled with the utmost discretion. A quiet knock on his office door interrupted his reading. Come in. Alice entered, her usual confidence notably diminished. We need to talk about. Trevor continued typing without looking up. Someone at work sent photos to HR of me and Derek. Alice's voice trembled. Really? How unfortunate. This isn't funny, Trevor. In a low tone, she added, they're launching an investigation. I could lose my job. Maybe you should have thought about that before engaging intimately with a client. Trevor's voice was ice cold. Alice's face flushed with anger. Did you do this? Are you the one who sent those photos? Would it matter if I did? God, I knew you were pathetic. You're trying to get me fired because you found someone better. Trevor slowly stood, meeting her glare. Better? Let's talk about better, Alice. Let's talk about Derek Mitchell, the gambling addict drowning in debt, the man who has been sued twice by former business partners. Is that your better option? Alice's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Oh, didn't that charming man ever mention his past? The millions he lost at casinos, the loans he's still paying off. Trevor pulled out a file and tossed it on the desk. Did he mention he's been involved with his secretary too? Or did you think you were special? You're lying. But, Alice's voice wavered, Derek would have told me, just as you told me about him. Trevor's laugh was cold. Face it, Alice. You threw away 8 years of marriage for a man who's just as deceitful as you are. Alice snatched up the file, flipping through the pages. Her hands trembled as she read the private investigator's report, complete with photos of Derek entering hotels with another woman, someone who wasn't you, Alice. She swallowed hard. This is fake. You fabricated this to hurt me, like those fake hotel receipts on our joint credit card, the ones you used to fund your little romance. Trevor stepped around the desk. Or maybe the fake text where you mocked me to your boyfriend, called me weak, pathetic. Would you like me to quote them? Stop it. Alice backed away. My personal favorite was the one about couple therapy. How did you put it? He actually cried about our emotional connection. God, it was pathetic. That must have given you and Derek quite a laugh. I never meant to get caught, Trevor said, moving closer and watching her retreat until her back hit the door. To have your perfect little affair exposed, to face consequences for once in your privileged life. What do you want from me? Alice's voice cracked. An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. Is that what you need to hear? Trevor's expression hardened. What I need is for you to understand something. He planted his hands on either side of her head, gently trapping her against the door. You thought you knew me. You thought you could predict how I'd react. The weak, passive husband who would eventually forgive and forget. Alice's breath caught. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. That man is dead, Trevor continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. You killed him the moment you decided to betray everything we built together. And the man who replaced him. He's not nearly as forgiving. Are you threatening me? She whispered. Threatening? No, Alice, I'm promising you. By the time I'm done, you'll understand exactly how badly you underestimated me. He returned to his desk, sitting down as if their conversation had been about nothing more important than the weather. You might want to prepare a good explanation for HR. Those photos are just the beginning. Alice's hand shook as she grabbed the doorknob. You're insane. Trevor's eyes met hers. I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She fled the office, leaving the file of Derek's history scattered across the floor. Trevor waited until her footsteps faded before pulling out his phone. Time to move to the next phase, he muttered as he dialed the number he'd memorized weeks ago. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Yeah, Mr. Lawson. This is Thomas from Riverside Capital's Compliance Department. We need to discuss some concerning transactions we've discovered in your client accounts. On the other end, Derek's breath hitched. What? What kind of transactions? I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Are you familiar with the Blue Room Bar? Let's meet there tonight at 8. And Mr. Lawson, I strongly suggest you come alone. Trevor ended the call, satisfaction coursing through him. Derek's gambling history made him the perfect target for this particular fear. The mere suggestion of financial impropriety would have him sweating bullets. Opening his laptop, Trevor began preparing for the evening's confrontation. He'd chosen the Blue Room, a carefully isolated location with minimal security cameras and private booths where conversations couldn't be overheard, the perfect place for a predator to corner his prey. And Derek was about to learn just what kind of predator he had awakened by pursuing a married woman. The Blue Room lived up to its name, casting everything in a dim, azure glow that turned shadows into liquid darkness. Trevor sat in the furthest booth, watching the door through the bottom of his whiskey glass. He'd arrived an hour early to prepare, positioning himself carefully with a clear view of both exits, away from the limited range of the security cameras. At exactly 8, Derek walked in. The confident swagger Trevor had observed outside his apartment was gone, replaced by nervous energy as Derek scanned the nearly empty bar. Trevor allowed himself a small smile. Amazing how quickly the mention of financial irregularities could shake a man's confidence. Mr. Mitchell. Trevor raised his hand, lowering his voice slightly. Over here. Derek approached, his expensive suit failing to hide the tension in his shoulders. Are you Thomas? From compliance. Have a seat. Trevor gestured to the booth across from him. Can I get you a drink? No, I'd rather discuss these transactions you mentioned, Derek replied, his fingers drumming against the table. Trevor took a slow sip of his whiskey. Interesting patterns, similar to ones we've seen before. At the mention of his previous gambling issues, the color drained from Derek's face. "How did you know about that?" Trevor set his glass down carefully. "I make it my business to know everything about the men who have been involved with my wife." Recognition flickered across Derek's features, followed quickly by fear. "You're Trevor Lawson, Alice's husband, the one you two have been laughing about in your texts." Trevor's smile remained cold. "I doubt you'll find this conversation very amusing." Derek started to stand. "I'm leaving." "Sit down," Trevor ordered. "We haven't finished discussing your indiscretions." "Look, Derek, what happened with Alice? It's complicated. It's between consenting adults." "Complicated." Trevor leaned forward. "Let's simplify it. You pursued a married woman. You helped destroy an 8-year marriage. You mocked and humiliated her husband in private messages. Does that about cover it? If you're looking for an apology, an apology." Derek's laugh was sharp enough to make him flinch. "From a man who once called me, and I quote, a pathetic wimp who needs to reclaim his dignity. No, I don't want your apology. I want something else entirely." Derek's hand crept toward his pocket. "If you're threatening me, the phone won't help you." Trevor pulled out Derek's iPhone and placed it on the table. Amazing how easily people leave their phones unlocked during their morning gym routine. Real fear crept into Derek's eyes as he patted his empty pocket. "What do you want?" "What do I want? I want you to understand something." Trevor's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Every action has consequences. Every choice creates ripples. You chose to pursue my wife, to mock my pain, to revel in my humiliation. Now it's time to face the ripples. Is that supposed to scare me?" Derek tried to sound confident, but his voice wavered. "I've dealt with angry husbands before." "Have you? And did those husbands know about the $2 million you lost at the Villaggio? Or the loans you're still paying off? How about the insider trading investigation that got quietly buried 3 years ago?" Derek's face went ashen. "How did you? Perhaps you didn't know." Trevor continued as if Derek hadn't spoken. "They know about your current activities, the creative accounting you've been doing with client funds. Amazing what a good private investigator can uncover." "Am I bluffing?" Derek asked. "Would you like to see the documentation?" Trevor pulled out a thick folder. "The bank records, the witness statements. I'm sure the SEC would find it fascinating." Derek's hands shook as he reached for the folder. "What do you want from me?" "First, you're going to end things with Alice, today, with no explanations, no dramatic goodbyes, no closure. You're just going to disappear from her life. And if you refuse—" Trevor's smile widened wickedly. "Then this folder goes to the SEC, your firm's board of directors, and every client whose money you've been misusing. How long do you think you'll last in prison, Derek? With your pretty face and expensive tastes?" "You're insane," Derek whispered. "No, I'm simply no longer playing by the rules you expected," Trevor said, standing slowly. "You have 1 hour to end it with Alice. Then you're going to take a job offer in another city. I hear Seattle has an opening that would suit you. And if you ever contact Alice again, if you ever breathe a word of this conversation to anyone—" He let the threat hang in the air. Derek stared at the folder, his face a mask of defeat. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "Almost." Trevor's fist connected with Derek's jaw before the other man could react, sending him sprawling from the booth. "That was for calling me pathetic." What followed was a blur of violence, precise and calculated. Trevor had chosen this isolated corner of the bar for a reason. By the time the bartender noticed the commotion, it was over. Trevor stood over Derek's crumpled form, breathing heavily. "Remember this moment. The next time you think about pursuing a married woman, remember what happens when you choose the wrong husband." He picked up Derek's phone and placed it next to his head. 1 hour, end it with Alice, or the folder goes public. And then, lowering his voice to a whisper, he added, "And Derek, if you ever breathe a word of what happened here, I'll make sure everyone knows about the things you do with your secretary in the conference room after hours. I have video of that too." Trevor straightened his jacket and walked out, leaving Derek groaning on the floor. In his car, he pulled out his own phone and checked the time. Alice would be waiting for Derek's usual evening call. Instead, she would receive a brief text ending their affair, followed by silence. Phase 2 of his plan was complete. Now for the final act. Trevor opened his laptop and began composing emails to Alice's closest friends and colleagues. Each recipient would receive carefully selected evidence of her infidelity, her cruel messages, her betrayal. By morning, her entire social circle would know exactly what kind of person she really was. Alice had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her safe, predictable marriage, and Trevor smiled grimly as he worked. She was about to get more excitement than she had ever bargained for. Later that midnight, Alice burst into Trevor's home office, mascara streaking down her face, phone clutched in her trembling hand. "What did you do?" she demanded. Trevor looked up from his computer with practiced indifference. "You'll have to be more specific." "Derek," her voice cracked. "He ended everything with just a text saying it's over. And now he won't answer my calls. His numbers are disconnected." She slammed her hands on his desk. "What did you do to him?" "Me," Trevor replied coolly. His eyebrows rose. "I've been here all evening working." Maybe he finally developed a conscience. "Liar!" Alice shrieked. "This is written all over it. First, the photos at work, and now this. Doesn't your perfect romance seem less perfect after all?" Trevor turned back to his computer. "Though I'm curious, did he mention the secretary he's also been involved with? Or did that not come up in your intimate conversations?" Alice's face went pale. "What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't know?" Trevor pulled up a video file, turning the screen toward her. The security footage clearly showed Derek and his secretary in an intimate embrace. "Guess you weren't as special as you thought." "This can't be real," Alice stammered. "Unlike your fake conferences and late meetings." Trevor's voice hardened. "Tell me, Alice, how does it feel to be on the receiving end of betrayals? To have your every secret exposed?" She sank into a chair, her anger crumbling into despair. "Why are you doing this? Why?" Trevor stood slowly. "Because you destroyed everything we built together. Because you mocked me, humiliated me, and treated my love as a weakness to be exploited." He moved around the desk. "You needed to learn that actions have consequences. So this is revenge." Alice's laugh was hollow. "Destroying my career, ruining my relationship." "No, this is just the beginning," Trevor said, leaning against his desk. "You see, while you were busy playing your little games, I was planning, learning, preparing. For the moment when you realize exactly how badly you underestimated me." His smile was cold. "Did you check your email tonight? Or your social media?" Alice's eyes widened as she grabbed her phone, fingers shaking, and opened her email. Her gasp was audible as she saw dozens of messages from friends and colleagues, all responding to the evidence Trevor had sent them of her affair. Every message where she had mocked their marriage, every cruel joke about his attempts to save their relationship, every detail of her sordid little affair. Trevor watched as she scrolled through her phone in horror. "I sent it all," he said calmly. "These are private messages, Alice." Her voice rose in panic. "You had no right. Just as you had no right to share intimate details of our marriage with your lovers." Trevor's tone was razor sharp. "To laugh about our therapy sessions, to mock my pain for your entertainment." Tears streamed down Alice's face as she read message after message from friends expressing their disgust, disappointment, and shock at her betrayal. "I'll lose everything," she whispered. "Now you understand how it feels to have your life dismantled piece by piece." Trevor returned to his seat, watch as everything you built crumbles around you. Alice stood on shaking legs. "I'll tell everyone what you did, how you stalked us, hacked our phones. Go ahead." Trevor's calm never wavered. Tell them how your husband discovered your affair, how he found evidence of your betrayal, and how he exposed your lies." He leaned forward. "Who do you think they'll sympathize with, Alice? The faithful husband who uncovered his wife's infidelity, or the cheating wife who destroyed her marriage for a man who was involved with his secretary?" Alice staggered back as the full weight of her situation hit her. "This isn't you. The man I knew." "The man you knew died the moment you betrayed me," Trevor said flatly. "The man you're dealing with now is someone entirely different, someone you created with your betrayal. I'll fight you on this." Her voice shook despite her attempted defiance. "The divorce, the house, everything." Trevor's laughter was cold. "With what evidence? What lawyer? What money?" He met her eyes. "Check our joint account balance." Alice fumbled with her phone again. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers Trevor had made. That's our savings. Half of it." "Yes, my half," Trevor said, his smile predatory. "Legally transferred after documenting your infidelity. Good luck explaining those hotel receipts to a divorce judge." Alice sank back into her chair, all fight leaving her body. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand something," Trevor said, walking to where she sat. "You thought you knew me. You thought you could predict how I'd react to your betrayal. You called me weak, pathetic, safe. But you forgot something crucial, Alice. The most dangerous predators are the ones who wait patiently in the shadows, watching, learning, planning their attack." "You're insane," she whispered. "No, I'm simply no longer the man you thought you could walk all over." He straightened up. "Now I suggest you start looking for a new place to live, and a good lawyer. Though I doubt you'll find one willing to take your case once they see the evidence I've compiled." Alice stumbled to her feet and fled the office. Trevor listened to her footsteps race up the stairs, followed by the slam of the guest room door. He opened his laptop and checked the timestamp on the scheduled email, set to go out tomorrow morning. More evidence, more revelations, more carefully planned destruction of Alice's carefully constructed world. She thought this was the end. She had no idea it was just the beginning. Alice stared at her computer screen, her hands frozen over the keyboard as email after email flooded her inbox. Each notification sound felt like another nail in her coffin. Her colleagues' responses ranged from professional disappointment to personal disgust, all reacting to the evidence Trevor had distributed of her affair. Then, a familiar voice from her boss made her jump. "My office." Now, walking down the office corridor felt like a march to the gallows, every whisper trailing behind her. Inside the office, Mr. Davidson sat behind his desk, his expression grave. "Close the door." Alice's hands trembled as she complied. "Sir, I can explain." He gestured toward his monitor. "The inappropriate relationship with a client, the misuse of company resources to conduct your affair, or perhaps the explicit photos taken in our conference room. Those photos were private. Nothing is private when it involves company liability." Mr. Davidson's voice was ice cold. "Do you have any idea the position you've put us in? Derek Mitchell isn't just any client. His firm represents millions in annual revenue." Alice sank into a chair. "I never meant to get caught." Mr. Davidson slid a document across his desk. "This is your termination notice. We'll pay out your remaining vacation days, but I need your badge and parking pass. Now you're fired, just like that." His laugh was bitter. "Alice, half our clients received emails detailing your indiscretions. Photos, text messages, explicit descriptions of acts performed in company facilities." He leaned forward. "You're lucky we're not pursuing legal action for breach of contract." "This isn't fair." Alice's voice rose in desperation. "Trevor did this. He's trying to destroy me." Mr. Davidson's eyebrows rose. "The same husband you mocked in messages to Mr. Mitchell, the one you betrayed and humiliated. From where I'm sitting, you destroyed yourself." Tears streamed down Alice's face. "I'll do anything. Take a pay cut, transfer departments, clean out my desk by noon. Security will escort you out. Mr. Davidson said, his tone brooking no argument. Alice stumbled from the office in a daze. At her desk, whispers and stares followed her every move as she packed her personal items into a cardboard box. 8 years of career building, gone. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Rebecca. How could you? Those messages about Trevor during therapy, beyond cruel. Don't contact me again. Another notification came. A message from her sister. Mom's crying. Dad can't even speak. He's so ashamed. Hope the affair was worth destroying our family. Message after message, each one severing another relationship. By the time security arrived to escort her out, Alice's entire social circle had crumbled. In her car, she tried calling Derek again. His number was still disconnected. His office claimed he'd accepted a position in Seattle effective immediately, with no forwarding contact information available. Damn you, Trevor, she whispered, gripping her steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Damn you to hell. Her phone rang. A caller ID that made her snarl. Happy now. You've ruined everything. Everything. Trevor's voice was calm. No, Alice. This is just the beginning. What more could you possibly do? Check your email. I just sent you something interesting from our joint account. Alice's hand shook as she opened her banking app. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers. Half their savings were gone. You can't do this, she cried. Actually, I can, and I did. All perfectly legal, documented after uncovering your infidelity. Trevor's tone was laced with satisfaction. Good luck paying for that luxury apartment you've been eyeing, or finding a decent lawyer. I'll fight you on this. Alice threatened. I'll tell everyone what you did to me. Trevor laughed coldly. You mean discover my wife's affair? Expose your betrayal. Document your cruelty. Go ahead. Tell everyone. Show them the messages where you mocked me during therapy, where you bragged about the intimate details you denied me. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. Alice's breath caught in her throat. Why are you doing this? Because you thought you knew me. Because you believed I was the weak, passive husband who would eventually forgive and forget. You forgot something crucial. Alice, the most dangerous predators are the ones who wait patiently, planning their revenge. You're sick, she whispered. No, I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. A series of notification sounds came through her phone. Oh, and Alice, you might want to start looking for a new gym. I just forwarded those texts about your trainer to the owner. Seems you have quite a pattern of inappropriate relationships. The line went dead before she could respond. Alice sat in her car, watching as former colleagues streamed past, carefully avoiding her gaze. Her phone continued buzzing with messages. Friends unfriending her on social media, family members expressing their disgust, and professional contacts severing ties. Another email notification caught her eye. Divorce papers from her lawyer. The documentation was comprehensive, leaving her no room to contest anything. Every betrayal, every cruel message, every misused joint fund, every piece was carefully catalogued and presented. Alice's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she could do nothing but watch it fall. In her new, sparsely furnished apartment, a far cry from the luxury condo she had imagined sharing with Derek, Alice sat on a second-hand couch in a one-bedroom unit on the wrong side of town. All she could afford now after Trevor's systematic dismantling of her finances. Her phone rang, displaying her mother's number. Alice's hand hovered over it, hope fluttering in her chest. After 3 weeks of silence, maybe. How could you? Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. Your father had to leave church this morning. Everyone is talking about those messages you sent, about what you wrote about Trevor during therapy. Alice's throat tightened. Mom, please, he loved you, supported you. And you mocked him when he cried during therapy, sharing intimate details of your marriage with that man. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Her mother's voice hardened. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, A mistake is burning dinner. A mistake is what you did. Don't call us again, not until you understand what you've done. The line went dead. Alice stared at her phone, another piece of her world crumbling away. Her social media accounts were a ghost town. Friends and family had either blocked her or posted public messages condemning her actions. At her door, a courier waited with a package. Alice Lawson. Yes, sign here. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper, with no return address. Alice's hands trembled as she opened it, then dropped it with a scream as she saw inside a perfectly preserved document, accompanied by a sealed envelope containing divorce papers waiting for her signature, and an ominous note accompanied by a preserved anatomical illustration, serving as a grim warning. Her phone rang again. Trevor, you. She could barely form words. You monster. Monster. Trevor's voice was eerily calm. Interesting choice of words from someone who laughed at her husband's pain, who mocked his attempts to save our marriage. What did you do to Derek? I simply helped him understand the consequences of his actions. A pause. Don't worry. He'll live. His love life might be somewhat diminished. Alice ran to her bathroom, retching into the toilet. When she returned to the phone, Trevor was still there. Why? She whispered. Why go this far? Because you needed to learn something. Trevor's tone took on a teaching quality. Actions have consequences. Choices create ripples. You chose to betray me, to humiliate me, to treat my love as a weakness. Now you're experiencing the ripples. Will you go to the police with your evidence? An anonymous package. And how will you explain the contents of your phone? The messages to Derek. The photos. Trevor laughed coldly. Face it, Alice, you have nothing. Alice sank to the floor, her strength leaving her. What do you want from me? What do I want? I have everything I want. Your career is in shambles. Your lover is gone. Your friends and family have abandoned you. He shuffled some papers. Oh, and the divorce is final next week. I assume you can't afford to contest it. A choked sob came from Alice. I never imagined that this would be your problem. Trevor's voice hardened. You saw what you wanted to see. The weak man, the pushover, the one you believed you could betray without consequences. Well, Alice, now you know exactly how badly you underestimated me. Please, she whispered, I'll do anything. There's nothing left to do. Your life, as you knew it, is over, Trevor stated matter-of-factly. The career you built, gone. The social circle you cultivated, destroyed. The man you thought would give you excitement, disappeared. A final pause. All that's left is for you to understand exactly how badly you underestimated me. Trevor, goodbye, Alice. Enjoy your new life. I hear the diner on 5th is hiring waitresses. The line went dead. Alice stared at the package on her floor, her mind racing with implications. Derek's sudden disappearance, the piece of him left as a warning, the complete destruction of her carefully built life. She had thought she knew her husband, thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. Instead, she had awakened something darker, more calculating than she could have imagined. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Her bank account was overdrawn, credit cards were maxed out, and the meager savings she'd managed to hide were gone. Trevor had thought of everything, every escape route, every possible refuge, every potential ally. He'd cut them all off one by one, until she was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. The divorce papers seemed to mock her from inside the package. Her hands shook as she reached for them, knowing she had no choice but to sign. No money for a lawyer, no evidence that wouldn't further incriminate her, no options left. Alice Lawson, who had once had everything, now sat alone in her cheap apartment surrounded by the ruins of her life, finally understanding the full cost of underestimating a man's capacity for revenge. Trevor stood in his empty house, surveying the bare walls where photos of his life with Alice once hung. The moving company had taken the last of his belongings that morning, All that remained was a laptop on the kitchen counter and a single envelope. His phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. Divorce finalized. Paper signed. You're officially a free man. A smile crossed his face as he opened his laptop to check his encrypted email account. Multiple messages confirmed his plans were in place. New identity papers waited in a safety deposit box, an offshore account was secured, and a job was lined up in another city under his new name. His phone rang. Alice's number. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. I signed them. Her voice was hollow, defeated. The divorce papers. You won. Won. Trevor leaned against the counter. This wasn't a game, Alice. These are consequences. You destroyed everything. My career, my friendships, my family. You destroyed those the moment you chose to betray our marriage. I simply made sure everyone saw who you really are. And Derek, what he did. Consider it a parting gift, something to remember me by. Trevor opened the envelope on the counter and admired his new driver's license. Though I doubt either of you will ever forget. A choked sob came through the line. I never thought you could be so cruel. That was your mistake. Trevor's voice was eerily calm. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict my reactions based on who I pretended to be. You never considered that you were not safe. A predictable husband can be capable of so much more. He paused. The police will do nothing. No evidence, no witnesses, just the ramblings of a disgraced woman who betrayed her husband. He smiled. Besides, I'll be gone before you even hang up this phone. Gone. What do you mean? Alice's voice trembled. Exactly what I said. New name, new city, new life. The man you married, he no longer exists. You killed him with your betrayal. And as for me, actually, I can and will disappear. Trevor picked up his keys. The house is yours, by the way, my final gift. Though you might have trouble keeping it on a waitress's salary. Please, Trevor, don't do this. It's already done. Alice pleaded. Trevor walked to the front door. Goodbye, Alice. I hope the excitement you craved was worth the price. He ended the call and blocked her number. Outside, his new car waited in the driveway. Sleek, black, and untraceable. Everything he owned now existed under his new identity, carefully constructed over months of planning. His phone buzzed one final time. A message from his private investigator confirming that Derek had taken the job in Seattle. The man hadn't been seen in public since their encounter at the Blue Room, and rumors were swirling about his sudden health issues. Trevor smiled as he started the car. Everything had played out exactly as planned. Alice's life was in ruins, her reputation destroyed, and her lover permanently marked by his revenge. The carefully crafted facade Alice had built around herself had crumbled, revealing the truth of her character to everyone who knew her. As Trevor pulled out of the driveway for the last time, he glanced in his rearview mirror. The house where he had lived with Alice grew smaller, along with the life he was leaving behind. 8 years of memories tainted by betrayal, now reduced to nothing more than a lesson in consequences. His new identity waited in the envelope beside him. New papers, a new background, a new beginning. The offshore accounts held enough money to start fresh. While Alice would spend years rebuilding from the ashes of her former life, the highway stretched before him, leading to a city where no one knew his name or his story. A place where he could rebuild without the shadow of betrayal hanging over him. He had planned every detail, considered every angle, and ensured that his revenge was as complete as it was untraceable. Alice had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her safe, predictable marriage. Instead, she learned a crucial truth. The most dangerous predators are the ones who hide in plain sight, waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. Trevor merged onto the interstate, leaving behind the ruins of his old life. In his mind, he could see Alice standing in her cheap apartment, staring at divorce papers, a gruesome reminder of the consequences of betrayal. He could imagine her checking her empty bank accounts, her silent phone, her absent friends and family. She had thought him weak, believed she could walk away and scavenge from her betrayal. Now she understood exactly how wrong she had been. The highway signs blurred past as Trevor drove toward his new life. Behind him lay the wreckage of his revenge, a devastated wife, a ruined lover, a marriage destroyed by betrayal. Ahead lay freedom, a fresh start, and the satisfaction of knowing he had made them pay for every moment of humiliation they inflicted upon him. Mistaking patience for weakness and calculation for cowardice. That mistake had cost them everything. As the sun set behind him, Trevor drove away from his old life, his revenge complete, his enemies broken, and his future wide open. Alice and Derek would spend the rest of their lives dealing with the consequences of their choices, while he disappeared into a new identity, leaving behind nothing but the memory of what happens when you mistake a predator for prey.